So good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are located. Thank you for joining us from all over the Americas. I'm here today with our DMC, Ahipara. Jean-Michel Jefferson is a founder, Ahipara for New Zealand. So Jean-Michel, I think you have a lovely program about food, wine for us today. Huh? So I let you start.
Thank you very much. Yeah, not too stressful today. Food and wine in New Zealand. Um, there's a fair amount of it, but what I'm going to do is take you through wine first of all, geographically, and show you what's here, and then show you some of my favorites, and then take you through food and what food means in New Zealand.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so first of all, here we've got a wine map of New Zealand. Again, to remind you, New Zealand is the length of the eastern seaboard of the US, so it's not that small. So, for example, to go from here, Auckland, to here, Taupo, that's about 4 hours of driving. Now, the length of the country has multiple different wine regions. So up here in Auckland, Waiheke, one wine region, another wine region here, another one here, another one here, another one here, another one here, and a big one down here. So the main thing that shows you is that it's possible to do the length of the country, maybe combining wine with landscapes, combining wine with adventure, combining wine with food, combining wine with whatever is of interest. So I thought I was meant to, here we go. Oops. Okay. Let's just go previous. Okay, I'm still learning how to use this thing. Okay, here we go. Our favorite wine region. So these are our favorites. Up here, Waiheke in Auckland. Over here, Hawke's Bay. Over here, just above Wellington, Martinborough. Waitaki Valley for one small reason, and Central Otago. Now, if I was to show this to any panel of New Zealand wine experts, there would be a bit of an uproar. Why isn't this here? Why isn't that there? These are chosen as places that are indicative, places that hold their own globally, and places that are also beautiful in lovely regions, and there's a reason to travel there. It's not just the taste of the wine. The first wine region in New Zealand was actually west of Auckland, and it was Yugoslav immigrants that started it way back in the 1900s. So we have the Yugoslavs to thank for that. Whereas now there's still a number of wineries back here, but it's become a little bit suburban. So that's why I don't have it in here, because it's like going to a suburban winery, and we have a rule of thumb here: is it worth flying 12 hours to go to this place? And the west of Auckland, I don't really think so, unless you're a total wine buff. Whereas over here, there's this little island just off Auckland called Waiheke. And Waiheke Island, actually, I think, here we go. And Waiheke Island is 19 kilometers by 11 kilometers. So it's a good size, but it's pretty small. It's about 50 minutes from Auckland by fast ferry. You can also get there by helicopter. There are helicopter restrictions. And a boat over to this particular bay, and I'll explain that in a moment. And so the ferry comes into this side of Waiheke, and this is where the population is, and it's where most of the wineries are, these little red dots. But you can take a private boat into this end, which has got one winery, which we think is well worth it. So over here, as I mentioned, the busier, swankier vineyards are here, things like this, exactly the sorts of things you expect to see in New World winemaking. Whereas over on this side, you get this setting, which isn't what you expect, something right by the sea. And the other thing about Man of War as a winery is that the wines are actually really quite delicious. They're very highly rated, and it's especially their Merlot Cabernet and their Syrah. So New Zealand in general became known for its whites rather than its red wines. And the red wines, because we're quite a cooler climate, the red wines tend to be quite light, like a Pinot Noir. And so compared to the big heavyweight reds that you get in California or over in Australia, it's much more delicate over here. These guys also do a really good Chardonnay. But my recommendation here is especially the Syrah. It's not, New Zealand isn't winning a huge number of prizes for Syrah yet, but it's our next wine that's coming through. And in much the same way as you're discovering wine regions in the States, where suddenly a region pops up and they think, oh, what can we do here? And they plant something and something works and something doesn't, and then something busts through and it's brilliant. That's what wine is like in New Zealand. Like I've got a friend here who's we'll talk about him later, but he is a phenomenal winemaker. Lots of international awards, and he was working with a French winemaker, and this guy came from one of the Burgundy houses, and he was doing some time in New Zealand, and the French winemaker said to Grant, he said, "Look, I feel really sorry for you." And Grant said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Well, you never know what's going to work anywhere that you put it. Whereas at home, we know that this particular slope is good for this particular wine and should be harvested at this particular time, and we know what's going on." He said, "Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying, but just think how exciting it is to be discovering what the soil is capable of, and we just don't know, and we're experimenting every year." So New Zealand wine exploded with Sauvignon Blancs down in the South Island, top of the South Island, um, 20, 30 years ago. I first started drinking in New Zealand, I think in 91. And at that time, it was a beer culture, and there was hardly any wine, and what wine there was okay. Since then, it has really evolved quite a lot. So Waiheke is a great one. Oh yeah, here I talk about one of the spectator sports over here. Because it's at a remote bay over here, what you get is a lot of what we call yachties, which are sailors, and they sail their boats, anchor in the bay, come on shore and drink far too much wine, and then you have the spectator sport of watching them try and get back on their boats, and people fall overboard and so on. So it's quite an enjoyable cultural occasion. Uh, so that's Waiheke as one favorite spot. So being pretty close to Auckland makes it a good place to come at the start. Auckland is misunderstood generally in tourism. It's a very interesting place. We kept a couple busy there during What America's Camp for 6 weeks, and busy not just doing rubbish, busy doing really good stuff. Um, so arriving into Auckland, we often recommend spending a bit of time, and it'll become more clear through the course of the presentation because there's a huge food angle to Auckland as well. Um, and this is a great way to get out, get some fresh air, see some beautiful islands out in the harbour. The harbour where Waiheke is sitting has got in it Waiheke Island. It's also got an island called Rangitoto. It's a volcano that came out of the sea only 600 years ago. So that's quite spectacular. There's a nature reserve island, and there's lots of other islands. So it makes for some beautiful sailing. So you go out here after 20 hours, shut up in a plane, get some fresh air, beautiful sailing, end up at this vineyard, which is just so relaxed, you want to kick your shoes off, and you enjoy some fabulous wines. So that's why Hickey, obviously a favorite of mine. Hawke's Bay, a more established wine region that's coming down the country, halfway down the North Island. I call it gentleman farmer region. That's the feeling it's got. It was um, where most of our apples came from back in the day when apples were more important. And a lot of that land was converted into vines. So it's been going in the wine scene for quite a while, and it's again won a number of awards. The big things here are Bordeaux blends, again, Cabernets, Merlots, but also Chardonnays. And we used to do some of those big, heavy Chardonnays when they were fashionable. Now that they're not so fashionable, you've got to search them out a little bit more. I actually quite like the big, heavy Chardonnays myself. So then they're still around, but you've got to look for them. So again, you can see what I was saying about the combination of interest on the palate and landscape. Because the landscape here, this is Tomato Peak. It's quite a sacred to Maori. what a setting! You've just got a phenomenal vineyard here, winery, pardon me, and in a fantastic setting. This is also one of my favourite vineyard restaurants and one of the most awarded vineyard restaurants in the country. So a great place to spend an afternoon. So what we ideally what you would do is go and do a wine tour in the morning if you can face drinking wine from 10 a.m. and go and see a number of different places and then end up at this place for a long lunch. Down in the bottom here, the National Tobacco Company. So Napier was destroyed by an earthquake in the 40s, the center was, and it was rebuilt totally in Art Deco. So they say that there's Art Deco of every style imaginable in a very small area, and this is one of them. And it just so happens that inside this Art Deco building is a winery that specializes in the heavy Chardonnays I was talking about. So you'd go and see places like this, which have got a real architectural interest and beauty in a place that's not hammered by tourists, and then end up in a place like this having a wonderful meal. Now, what we find by the time people get to New Zealand, they've done their wine tasting in France, they've done California, they've even tasted wine in South Africa, and so by the time they get to New Zealand, they're a little bit sick of formal wine tastings, and often they say to me, Jean-Michel, look, we don't want to do a formal wine tasting, but we want to taste New Zealand wine, so I go straight vineyard lunch, and this is one of the places for a vineyard lunch, and you can try their wines, and you do. We can provide a wine list to try as you go through the country, and you know you get a you can't escape New Zealand wine when you're in New Zealand. It's everywhere. So I've got three favorite vineyard restaurants. One was at Waiheke, which was the previous slide, and this is another one here. Central Otago. This is where I live, way down south. And again, you've got this sort of scenic beauty. This is more rugged. It's quite a dry region. And then here you can see this is in the Kawara Gorge. If anyone's been here, these guys do a really nice Gewürztraminer, by the way. So it's not just the main wines that we do, but their Gewürztraminer is excellent, not too sweet. So the main, and you can see here, there's Queenstown. And these places here around Gippsland, which is here. And then you go down here and then up here to Nevis. So that whole region, again, is a lovely wine touring region. Now, obviously, there we'd recommend a guide because there's the drink drive issue. And there is a phenomenal vineyard restaurant, which has won the prize the last 3 years as the best vineyard restaurant in New Zealand. And they do an 18-course degustation if you can handle that. Quite interesting food. Main guy I want to talk about is this man here, Grant Taylor, and you can see what I say about him here. There's two main wine shows in the world, I'm told. There's the London International Wine Show and there's the Los Angeles one. So the French had dominated Pinot Noir at the London Wine Show forever until this man came along and took the prize for best Pinot in the show. He's now done it 4 times. And so that was New Zealand arriving with Pinot Noir. And it was Grant Taylor, lovely man. He's a friend. He got married here at my place. And he comes and we taste and drink too much wine together. And he's a genius. He's retiring now. So he doesn't meet our clients anymore, and he's moved away a little bit. I mentioned another region before, the Waitaki, and the Waitaki region is that way. I'm getting confused with that camera, and it's about 2 hours from here. And there he's set up a beautiful little wine bar, and so now he sits at the wine bar and enjoys a few drinks with people. So it is possible still to go and see him, but he's handed over the winemaking in the Gippsland Valley to a wonderful lady called Jen Parr, who is achieving the same results as Grant. So she's phenomenal. Great team, lovely little under the radar, family owned winery, and wines which are available in the States. So it is possible to drink them here and go home and buy them there, or you can ship them or do whatever you want. And there's also quite an interesting man here who does one of the best New Zealand champagnes, sparkling wines. He's called Rudy Bauer, and he's started, and I've just got some on order. It hasn't arrived yet. He's done some Gruner Veltliner. So every year we get these talented winemakers who have a little play, and they've had something in their mind, and they're going to try something, and off they go. So yeah, really quite exciting. So there we go. That's the Pinot Noir down south. So if you're going to choose one of those regions for a client traveling, then again, it's up to client interests, and you'll be going to these various regions for a number of reasons, whether it's the accommodation or the activities available there or whatever. So one of them will make sense, but every single one of these is a world-class winner, and with beautiful fresh air, not too many people, and yeah, and phenomenal landscapes, as you can see. The food scene. So I like to joke, being part French, I like to joke that New Zealand is the opposite of French in terms of food. Now, I cooked a few times in France, not professionally, and if I ever departed from the way my grandmother did it, I'd get told off by the relatives. So France has a very has a formula, whereas New Zealand grew up with no formula at all. We were blessed with English food here, and English food from the 1970s, which, if any of you remember that, was frankly quite awful. And so, in the same way as England had a renaissance in their own food and brought in outside influences, New Zealand, not really having any gastronomic tradition, um, brought in traditions from overseas. From New Zealanders traveling overseas, they often New Zealanders have what they call their OE, their overseas experience, which means that after they've finished at university, they work for a year or two, make a little bit of money, and then travel for a year or two to see what the rest of the world's about. So they would do this, and they would come back. They fell in love with France and Italy in terms of food, and they brought back influences from France and Italy. So those are the bases of New Zealand food. Being so close to Asia, the next thing to come in was a lot of Asian influences. We do a lot of Asian fusion. And there are some resident chefs here from China, from Korea, from Singapore, and obviously Japan. We have, as you can see here, phenomenal seafood, which often finds itself on a first-class flight to Japan, and for their sushi and sashimi. But there is one Japanese restaurant here, which is, if anyone's really into the Japanese food, I'd recommend this one. Although we tend to say when you're in New Zealand, try New Zealand, but this guy's just incredible. Again, he does a phenomenal degustation, and you walk out there shaking your head thinking, was this real? So, having been a gastronomic desert, New Zealand now is quite exciting, but it's still patchy. I don't know if I've done a map. No, I haven't done a map. So that's Auckland. It's still quite patchy in that Auckland, I could probably take someone around Auckland who is a true foodie and keep them interested without dropping quality for a couple of weeks. So there is some very good depth in Auckland in cuisine, from street food to white tablecloth and various fusions, as you can see here. Um, so Auckland's exciting, um, but you drive 2 hours south of Auckland and you're desperately trying to find something edible. Um, so after that, it becomes yeah, oases in the desert a bit. I'm exaggerating a little bit. A lot of the normal standard cafes have come up a long way in terms of what they do. But if you're having a meal that you want to go stand up and say, "Oh wow, that was just incredible," then it tends to be either the main cities, and Auckland is the best by far, um, or um, or the luxury lodges, or the odd restaurant here and there. Um, so here on the left, I just took. Now there's an old saying in New Zealand, a Maori saying, which is the kumara, which is the sweet potato. The kumara should not speak of its own sweetness. So instead of getting bored and hearing me say, "Oh, that one's great," "Oh, that one's great," what I've done here is I've found some quotations that someone else has done, about a number of different restaurants. Um, this one's pretty interesting, Ahi, because this is New Zealand and it's the new New Zealand. Like when the English redefined their cuisine and started doing their mushy peas in a way that was edible. Um, it's that sort of thing. So that it looks like ahi food here on the front. That looks like a fritter, probably a seafood fritter of some sort. And these are pico pico. These are the inside of the fern plant, which is edible. So, so this sort of ahi food, and we'll go into it in some detail, it draws on Maori influence, who were obviously here a long time before us Europeans, and does Maori fusion. So ahi really quite interesting intellectually. Um, then yeah, I'm not a fan of going to places that don't belong here. Like something I'm fond of quoting to my staff is people don't travel all the way here from Europe to have a Spanish meal because Spain's a lot closer and a lot better to home. But this one here, I'm afraid stands up. Like I've eaten some very, very good food in Barcelona and over in Cadaqués, which is Salvador Dali's favorite beach spot. And I go weak at the knees at the idea of Spanish food. This one stacks up if you want a bit of that. It is. Cassia, I've got an English father. So us English people, we grow up with curries, Indian curries. This guy is incredible. Up there, probably better actually than anything I've had in London. And whenever I travel back to London, I'm always looking for what's happening on the curry scene. Um, this one really cool. I was totally unaware of Korean food until I went to this one, and it's a cool sort of street style. Absolutely delicious again. And Masu, this is like, yeah, I love the brasseries in Paris. This is like a Japanese version of a brasserie. It's bustling and there's plates going in every direction and absolutely delicious. So, so Auckland, as you can see, exciting. Here, none of these places would have made the newspapers, but you can see that there's a bit of interest and a bit of sophistication here. Here, you can see the Asian fusions that we have. It just looks delicious, making me hungry, even though it's breakfast over here. Okay, so that's Auckland, and I love Auckland. So there, immediately when you're looking at planning a balanced itinerary for clients, almost 90% of our flights come into Auckland. There are many reasons to spend time in Auckland, and not just food and wine, but the food and wine ones are world class so far. Oh yeah, so this is ahi, just to show you. Um, this is the Maori fusion. So here, for example, ika, which is the Maori term for fish. Um, yeah, local mushrooms, celeriac pappardelle. So you can see combinations there of French and Italian immediately, together with New Zealand. Not a lot of New Zealand stuff in that. Wild shot red deer. We do a lot of foraging in New Zealand, and the deer are part of our foraging basket. Um, I'm looking for something more New Zealand. Maybe they're under this thing here. Um, the Wagyu style that you can see there, that's um, the Japanese influence that's come in. And yeah, corn dog. We've got an American influence here. Corn dog, that's a scampi. And they're the long-finned eel. That's actually quite delicious. A Maori staple food, the long-finned eel. Um, so you can see there what I meant about fusion. Quite, you can tell immediately that this is a sophisticated menu, but it also feels quite sort of hip. And this is ahi up here on the top. Actually, they're both ahi. Um, you can see the combination of materials, beautiful wood there, and then that's a native timber, and the relaxed sort of style. And this is where people in New Zealand who have got a bit of money come to spend it. And there you go, what you'd expect to see in a top restaurant anywhere in the world. So that's ahi. Oh yes, Mr. Tom. So this guy is an old friend, and we found each other about 17, 18 years ago, when he was looking to start his business based around Maori food. And I was looking for a way to showcase Maori food without going to somewhere that was too pumped by tourists or too commercial. So we've been working together ever since. He's refused to take clients from other people, I keep telling him to take clients from other people, but he says no because the other ones don't know what they're coming to. Whereas our ones are always well briefed and happy, and they know what they're doing, and they enjoy what he shows. So he's got a 4,000-acre block in the centre of the North Island of New Zealand, and he's been working that for the last 17, 18 years. He's one of the finest deer hunters in the country. He's a tracker, a search and rescue tracker. So when people get lost in the bush, he's the guy who goes out and finds them. Um, and he's a very, very fine shot. I went hunting chamois with him, and he shot a chamois off a hill that I couldn't even see. He told me it was about 600 meters. Unbelievable. So he's a very fine hunter, great search and rescue. He can teach people how to track. He can trap eels with our clients. He's a great storyteller. Together with his Maori heritage, he has a touch of Irish. And so Maori have quite a sense of humor, and Maori plus Irish together is quite a combination. So he's a cool guy, really cool guy. Um, and so what he does with our clients is puts together a meal like you see here and puts it underground on hot rocks, covers it in well, we call it blankets, but it's like those coffee bags that you see, those Hessian coffee bags. Um, and then covers it in soil, and then it cooks underground. And then you pull it out and eat it. And in the meantime, while that's all happening, he's talking about the significance of all sorts of things. The conversation could go in a number of different directions from there. And as you can see again, the pico pico Maori staple, the Maori potato, um, eh, the bun, which has come in from Europe or the West, from the States. But looking at the size of that one, that's probably a US one. The pico pico there as well, and got crayfish in here. It, wow, yep. So that is. I wouldn't call it haute cuisine by any stretch of the imagination. It's quite rustic, but it's traditional in the middle of nowhere, very tasty and definitely authentic. And he's a cool guy. So that's up there to show a different angle. Um, Foraging in New Zealand. I mentioned before that foraging is quite a big thing. So what New Zealanders do when they go on holiday is first of all switch the cell phone off and kick the shoes off, and then work out where to get food. And a lot of it tends to be sea-based with fishing. We've got plentiful fish around the shores, but then it also tends to be hunting. Deer were introduced here in the 1920s, so that they're not endemic, and they went wild because there's no predators. So for many years, the New Zealand government used to pay professional shooters to keep the deer population down, which, as you can all imagine, shooting an animal and just letting it rot is a bit of a waste. Um, so the New Zealand hunters sort of came into being, and we're always out there. Almost everybody who lives rurally in New Zealand will have wild venison in their freezer, whether they went out and shot it themselves or they were given it by someone else who shot it. So the shooting of animals here is they're not endangered. We need to keep the numbers down. It's not seen as a bad thing. It's seen as a good thing, and it's very tasty. So that's the deer angle. Number of different deer, as I mentioned there: red deer, fallow, sika, and whitetail, um, and absolutely delicious. Chamois. I mentioned I went out with Tom, and there's Tom in the middle down the bottom again. I went out with two of my kids beside him. He was teaching them how to hunt. So went out with Tom as a thank you to him for all the work he'd done, and I took him up in the Alps, which he couldn't normally get to because you got to get there by helicopter. And we went hunting chamois. The taste of chamois backstraps, just gently sautéed, is absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe it myself. I'd never had a chance to have it before. So again, the chamois and the tar. Translated here as a Himalayan mountain goat doesn't sound that great, but the tar is a phenomenal animal. It's covered in long hair. It can see for kilometers. It can run up cliffs. It's a superhero of the animal kingdom, and I call it the champagne of goats. So people are already realizing that goat meat can actually be quite nice. Himalayan goat it takes it up another level of sophistication and delicacy of taste. Really, really superb. Then we get into what we call crayfish, which technically is a rock lobster, which Harvey, this is one of my favorite heli pilots. And with him, we pioneered a trip where you would fly by helicopter over to the deserted west coast, and he knew an area where in chest deep water, you could hold your breath, poke under a rock, and grab one of these with your hand, and bring it out again. And so this is something that we offered, and we still offer to our clients. A lot of our clients say, no, no thanks. Can you do it for us, please? And that's not a problem. The pilots can't, they love doing that. It's how they do it for their own families. So they drag them out and have a barbecue in the middle of nowhere. Same place had pawa, which is our Blackfoot abalone. Um, and so typically after a little stop there, you would fly away to somewhere sheltered with lobster and abalone and cook it on a barbecue. Again, this would be basic as you'd expect, a barbecue in the middle of nowhere. So not haute cuisine, but a meal that most people really remember. Scallops in season, we can take people looking for scallops as well. So we can teach people how to get all these things and take them and gather their own food if that really interests them. Um, and spearfishing. We've taught a number of people over the year how to spearfish. And the most exciting fish to spearfish for a beginner would be a juvenile kingfish. Juvenile kingfish, okay, the screen's not big enough, maybe about 3 foot long. Um, and so that's a good target, and they move quite fast. Great thing to learn on. Mature kingfish, 50 kilos. No, 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 you don't want to do that. And in New Zealand, they spearfish for marlin, 150 kilo beasts, and you've got to be able to hold your breath for about 3 minutes as these things take you deep underwater as they try and escape. So you don't do that one either. That one's too dangerous. But spearfishing for the juvenile versions near the surface, yep, that's good. We put traps in for freshwater cray and eels. Now, freshwater cray in France we know as écrevisse. Um, and in France, I was lucky enough to have poached these with my uncles down in the deep south. There's not too many left there because of people like my uncles. But in New Zealand, there's quite a few, and only Maori are allowed to collect them. So again, Tom can go out at night with clients and lay the traps, and then the next day you come back, and it's really good with kids as well, and see what you've got, and then you cook them up. And same with eels. We tend to smoke eels so a bit longer in the preparation process, but it's a very Maori thing. And the fern hearts, the pico pico I mentioned earlier, we can gather those. Watercress, a big thing with Maori. You find a beautiful bit of the clearest running water you can find, and you drag out huge clumps of watercress, put those with your meal. Mussels, oysters, yes. Whitebait. Whitebait are the, what we call whitebait are those tiny, oops, there's the camera, tiny, tiny little fish, which you then fry up. Quite a delicacy here. Trophy trout. Now the trophies tend to be catch and release, so we don't eat those. Um, but when you go into the lakes are not catch and release, and so what you can do is you can go and do your trophy fishing if you want, then pop down to the lake and catch a couple for dinner. Um, and then if you want to go out on a boat in the far north of New Zealand, that's where we've had world record striped marlin, world record yellowtail kingfish, world record hapuku. So this is real, very, very good deep sea fishing up here for people who want to do that. So the whole foraging scene is a big thing. Now you can either just taste the fruits of it, or if you're a forager and mad about it, you can go deep into it yourself, and we can drag out all sorts of guides who can show you different aspects. But it's a big thing in New Zealand. The other big thing for luxury tourists in New Zealand would be lodge dining. Um, so the reason they set up these luxury lodges 30 years ago, when the country was a gastronomic desert, you would try and entice luxury tourists here, and there was nothing decent for them to eat. And so these lodges started in the middle of nowhere, like the lodge at the start and Solitaire, and they brought in really good chefs, and they became these oases of sophistication in the middle of these wild, wild landscapes. And those wild landscapes are now a little bit more sophisticated, so it's not quite what it was. But the lodges have stayed, and they're continuing. There's a new restaurant which is opening as we speak. Well, it's October really, so not as we speak. So opening next month, Flock Hill. Now the Flock Hill restaurant is this one here, the third picture down. That's opening this October. Very interesting. They're using the one of the chefs that was designing it is a forager. So you imagine bringing a forager together with Michelin quality chefing. That's what this restaurant is doing in the middle of nowhere. It's in Arthur's Pass, one of the most scenic passes on the South Island, and it's allowing locals as well as guests. So it's going to have a nice restaurant vibe. It's not going to feel like a closed, a sealed dining room in the middle of nowhere. And so they're going to be probably taking the menu like you saw at Ahi even further. We're really quite excited to go and eat there. Next one, there's no picture of this one, Split Apple. Fascinating place. So this guy is a Californian originally, and then he moved to Hawaii and then moved to New Zealand 25, 30 years ago. A doctor. One day he found out that he had cancer, and so he read everything he could about how to cure it. And through his research, he worked out that it was easier to keep people healthy than to try and cure them. And so he developed a cuisine, a menu together with his Thai wife around healthy food. And so you go to this place and you eat. You can go there and heavily overindulge, make an absolute pig of yourself in terms of the quantity you eat, and you will go to bed feeling light, no indigestion, wake up the next day having lost weight from the night before. It's unbelievable the science that he puts together there. They also have a very good cooking school if you want to go deeper into it. So that's the best wellness lodge in New Zealand, without a doubt, and phenomenal from the food side. More traditional Otahuna. That's this bloke here, Jimmy the chef. He's been at Otahuna since it's opened 25 odd years ago, and established garden on the English style. And so you can go out there, you forage for your food. No, the chef, sorry, forages for your vegetables, your herbs, and so on. They've even got a little underground mushroom growing place. Um, so for the more classic, established, he's brilliant. But as you can see, still not a lot of formality, great sense of humor. And yeah, you can tell he's loving what he's doing and he's a master of it. Um, Hapuku Lodge, that's a pretty cool one. Some of the lodges here can get a little bit samey, and I'm not going to name them now because this is a positive presentation. They can get a bit samey in what they produce. This one isn't samey. The food, the restaurant here was started by a runner-up. Oh, there she is, runner-up for the MasterChef competition. So she was an amateur, really, when she started this. And they've kept the cuisine here different, vibrant. And Hapuku Lodge is at a place called Kaikoura. Kaikoura in Maori, kai means food, koura means crayfish. What a surprise. It's a place where you get lots of crayfish. So they focus on crayfish here. Um, and you can see quite funky, quite minimalist, and always interesting, always interesting. And Whorikoho, which is this place up here. Um, that's what I call a true Aholian chateau. Absolute quality from top to toe, sophistication, style, and a bit of the French influence in to go with the New Zealand. So for just perfect balance and style, Forico are brilliant. That's just an example of five of them. That there's another 15 in the country, plus. So the lodge dining people do talk about. One thing to be aware of if we're planning itineraries is not to do this every night, because there have been stories of people arriving in Queenstown and saying, please can I cancel dinner? I just need a hamburger. I've got food coming out of my ears. So not every night, but yeah, great to have them now and again. This is, you're probably thinking by now, yeah, what do the normal people do? So this is what the normal people do. This is a cafe in Auckland. So again, back to Auckland. Yeah, this looks all right, doesn't it? You read the internet says forget Auckland. Nah, I lived there 12 years and I had a brilliant time. So the Auckland beach scene is lovely, and you can see here a normal cafe style. So again, that looks relatively sophisticated. So not super duper like some of those restaurants that we saw, not degustation menu, but a really nice level. And you can find places at this level around most of New Zealand. Now there'll be some parts of New Zealand where I'll tell you no, not there. There, you just got to, you know, manage with what you can find. But this place, these sorts of places, very good. Oh, that's it. That's it. We've come to the end. Yep, that's the end. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Jean-Michel. It was fascinating presentation. So happy to see that you have so much knowledge, and I can only imagine what you can do for itineraries, huh? So let's see if
Mm.
we have no, Celine was saying hello, and I don't see any question. Anyone? Is there any question for Jean-Michel? I know it was very details, and I think everybody's going to trust you putting together some amazing itinerary. I can't wait to be there myself. And
You've got to come.
oh yes, yes, yes. I just have to find the dates, but and
Mhm.
I think it's a great angle, huh, to always sneak in a little bit of food and wine, even if the clients are maybe going for adventure. They all want to eat well anyway. Huh?
Absolutely, absolutely. We get very few people who come here and say, "I want to only do food and wine."
Yeah.
The main thing that people come here for is landscapes, and they say, "I want to do landscapes, but while I'm doing landscapes, I want to taste the landscapes a bit." Yeah, sure, we can do that. Um, and of course, sorry.
Oh, no, no, I just saw Jasmine say, no question. It was very clear and interesting. Thank you. Then Mackenzie, thank you. Love learning more about the food and wine scene. I think that was really, everyone's is going to be saying that. Jennifer, you mentioned there is a lot to do in Auckland. How would you suggest selling Auckland to clients? Best hotel, day trip?
Yep. What I'd suggest, because Auckland, up here, you can see has got this bit of water around it, which is the Hauraki Gulf. And then over here, it's got the West Coast. Now, if any of you are old enough to have seen the depressing film The Piano, um, which was black sand and crashing surf and rainforest, that was West Coast Auckland.
Mhm.
So, so how would I sell Auckland? In the center of Auckland, you've obviously got a Park Hyatt, which a lot of people go for because it's got big rooms. We tend to recommend instead a new hotel called the Britomart. Now, the Britomart is a sustainable hotel, and because it's a sustainable hotel, it's got smaller room sizes. So if people are worried about the small room size, we'd send them somewhere else. But the Britomart is funky, inner city, chic, leading edge, a little bit sort of warehousey, exposed brick walls in the middle of it, but super high quality. One of the best seafood restaurants in Auckland is situated in their lobby. It's their own, and it's slap bang in the center of the eating zone. So that is my favorite, for people to stay there. But there is a choice of half a dozen hotels in Auckland at lots of different price points. Half a dozen that we like, that is, really good ones. Over on Waiheke Island, there's a lovely little lodge called Delamore. If people don't want whatever, they don't want a city, we can base them on Waiheke Island instead. And this is a sort of 6 bedroom, lovely spa area, wellness, phenomenal view, lovely swimming pool, lodge on Waiheke. That's the other option. Um, but we recommend for the buzz, the vibe, Central Auckland. And we're also putting together an itinerary in Central Auckland, or a menu of cool, funky, new, young places. And this is where my daughter took me. And she said, "I'm going to do a food adventure for you, Dad." And I went, "Oh, can't wait." And so we went up to this area where they did street food and student food, and it was off under the radar, and it was absolutely delicious. So so I would tease out the dining preferences of people and then point them at a couple of menus which would get them. Then on the east coast, where Waiheke Island is, as I mentioned, all those beautiful islands, the Hauraki Gulf is one of the most beautiful places to sail on this planet because of the relief, because of the backdrop, because of the islands and so on. So you can either take a motorboat out there or a sailing boat. Typically, when people get here, they've done at least 12 hours of flying. Often they've done 20 hours of flying. So fresh air. It's a good idea to get out there in fresh air. So fresh air on a boat is one of my wins. Also, you can get on that boat and wake and sleep and get over the flight. Or fresh air on the West Coast where they filmed the piano and I walk along that beach. And that's where the prevailing wind comes in. So there's usually a breeze there. So, so I would say land in Auckland, get some fresh air. The museum's got the best collection of Polynesian artifacts in the world. We can do a behind the scenes tour of Maori portraits in the Auckland Art Gallery. Then there is a local Maori chief who can take you through a journey. He does a dawn blessing on a piece of sacred land overlooking the sunrise. And there he takes you through the history of Maori warfare, Maori European warfare, colonization, where they are today. And where they are today, they've built gardens for vegetables in the center of Auckland in their own tribal zone based on sacred geometry. So he's really, really interesting. Um, there you go. A number of different things in Auckland. You're muted, Dominique.
Oh, I said Julian was saying wonderful webinar. Jennifer, you said it's worth visiting the island of Auckland, even if you're not into wine. For instance, for family into nature and adventure, good or
Yeah,
not. Huh? But I
yeah.
think you mentioned that was. Another question from Jennifer. Question for the moment. Do you work with all budget? Is there a minimum for festive booking? Do you do touring only or only full booking, including hotels?
Okay. We do touchdown to takeoff. We only handle full itineraries. In the past, when we haven't handled a part of an itinerary, that is the part that's always gone wrong. So now we just make it a rule. We only handle full itineraries. In budget levels, it's not seasonal. Some people put surcharges, but some properties put surcharges on around festive. We don't. We do work with all budgets, but there is a minimum at which we become useful, and that minimum is it's about 1,000 US a day for a couple, and that would get you 4 star. Um, that would get you a 4 star bed and breakfast, a rental car, and an activity per day. If you're going to go 5 star, you're looking at about 1,000 US a head a day in the country. And if you're looking at going super lodge the whole way, you need to go up from there. Our average itinerary value last year, I think, was 70,000, 60 or 70,000 US dollars around the country. Um, but you keep those rough guidelines in place, and we can start working magic. Below that, we can't work magic because we don't know 3 star and we don't know the group tours. There's other people who know that stuff better than us. Um, but yeah, a grand a couple for the 4 star and a grand ahead for entry level 5 star.
Thank you. Lynn, she said you have clients going to Auckland and wants to do one day trip to Waikiki Island. Restaurant suggestion.
Well, it depends what they like and how long they've got.
Yeah.
Tantalus Winery, if they haven't got a lot of time, then Tantalus on the East Coast is good, and they can get to that quite easily.
Mhm.
The trouble with the Eastern Waiheke wineries is that they were promoted by the ferry company and to try and get people to jump on the ferry. And so there's some of them are part of a bus tour. And so you want to avoid the bus tour. And you can avoid the bus tour with timing, or you can avoid the bus tour by going to certain places that the bus tour doesn't go to. So
Yeah,
some wineries don't allow the buses. And for me, I like the one way out in the middle of nowhere.
thank you. Stacy said, thank you so much for your presentation. Jennifer, do you like Fable Hotel Auckland? And thank you, that was awesome.
It's okay, the Fable. I've stayed there. The sales manager's lovely, and it's well priced and it's well situated, but it's a hotel. It's nothing. You know, people would come out and say, "Oh yes, that was nice," whereas people would come out of the Britomart and go, Oh, that was a bit different. Um, and we like to go for the points of difference, but for some people, yeah. And the price point of the Fable is good, uh, but it's a little bit mainstream in what it delivers to clients. Although having said that, the food there is actually pretty good as well. Yeah, and it's a good option.
All right. I don't see any more questions, but I think we are way above our 30 minutes, but that was fascinating. So it's okay. Huh? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Jean-Michel will be sending you the recording, and then you can continue to ask him more questions. Melody said thank you. Tanya said thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and hope to see you tomorrow for 2 other webinars. We go to Rick Creek Lodge in Wyoming, and we go to Clinique La Prairie in Montreux. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Tanya. And thank you, Jean-Michel. That was fascinating. Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.